Well, Unheard had a very, very cool behind the scenes experience with Donald Trump's military parade. Love it or hate it, we have the behind the scenes details. What it was like actually in the White House press pool for this historic event. Hasn't been a military parade like this since the early 90s in Washington, D.C. and in the United States. And thankfully, our producer of the show had new media pool duty that day, which is really cool. It means you're part of the official White House press pool. Representing the new media. Some of you know I've mentioned producer Rachel before. She was fantastic. Some of the pictures she took, I hope she puts them up while she edits this, were just fantastic. I mean, really gorgeous shots that capture what was, I would say, a strange day in Washington, D.C. We also had more eyes and ears on the ground. So we're going to break it down, what it was like both behind the scenes in the White House press pool and what it was like to be in the crowd. We had people doing both with eyes and ears on both sides for this huge historic event. And since it's happened in the last few days, it's been an enormously crowded news cycle, and people have rightfully been focused on what's happening in Iran. We did, though, want to just collect this reporting for our wonderful Undercurrents audience because there has been just some narratives that have sprung out of that event that, people say journalism is the first draft of history. I always hate that. I mean, it's kind of true, but I hate it because it feels like a cop-out when you say that, like, oh, it's only the first draft. And I think, we've had some time to talk this through as a team, put together our footage, and hopefully bring you inside this so you can feel like you get a little bit closer to the truth. Now, I was an outside observer, and I had an impression from social media and from the news coverage, actually, that was different than the folks that we had on the ground covering this. So let's talk about that. First of all, as a reminder, undercurrents.tv, join the Undercurrents community. You get all kinds of good stuff over there, and subscribe on YouTube, wherever you download your podcasts. Now let's start with what I think is the first major narrative that emerged on social media, which is that it was a sparse crowd, that it was kind of a pathetic turnout, that it wasn't quite what, Donald Trump would have wanted to see. And maybe that last part is true. I'm sure Trump would have wanted something genuinely like historic levels of turnout in the National Mall. So it looks like those pictures of, huge inaugurals or like the March on Washington or something like that. But, from what we collected on the ground there, it was actually it was a pretty dense crowd. It was a pretty good turnout. The White House said that it was 250,000 people. I don't know that that's accurate, but one of the things that our team said is as these social media videos went around, there were particular parts on this long parade where the risers weren't totally full, something like that. There were a lot of people there and a lot of people sharing snippets of what they saw on social media. Again, we had people sort of in different parts of the parade. And what our team can say is that it felt pretty crowded, that it didn't feel like it was sparse, or that, it didn't reflect those moments where, in fact, we were actually talking. I was asking about the clip of the squeaky tank that was going around the internet, and it was hilarious. I mean, if that was representative of what the parade was, man, that would be a miss for Trump. But, from what I've seen, and I've covered a lot of this stuff in Washington, D.C., you remember I was at Kamala Harris's closing speech on the National Mall not too long ago. I was reporting during January 6th. I've been to multiple inaugurals. The crowd looked fine. It didn't blow me away. It didn't look shocking, but it also didn't look tiny. And that was confirmed by the folks that we have who said it was actually pretty high energy. That was another thing that was hard to tell from social media because the weather was miserable. I mean, it was incredibly humid, gray, and drizzly, like the worst possible type of weather for like a high energy parade and a big turnout. But it felt high energy from what my colleagues report back. It seemed like people were happy with the event, and that the crowd was pretty decent. So again, having covered a lot of this stuff, seen a lot of this stuff, I wasn't blown away by the crowd, but it also doesn't seem to have been a tiny crowd at all. It doesn't seem to have been a depressed and disappointed crowd. One of the funny anecdotes that was just relayed back to me by producer Rachel is that when they were playing some of the SpawnCon from like Lockheed and the defense contractors, people in the crowd were kind of laughing it up and enjoying it, which is funny because obviously there's been a wedge sort of driven between typical conservative backers of the military-industrial complex and the military-industrial complex itself by none other than Donald Trump since about 2015, 10 years ago now. So I thought that was a little interesting bit of color, actually. Second thing I want to talk about is apparently you could hear just fine. Now, again, this was a long parade, but one of the reports on social media is that it was hard to hear what was happening, which during a parade like this actually would be a major problem because you have this equipment being rolled past parade goers. They were trying to tell this story of 250 years of the American military. That's obviously what this parade was about, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But if you can't sort of follow along and understand what you're seeing, this would be a parade where that would particularly be problematic. Our team reports that wasn't the case. And I also wanted to mention the protests did not disrupt the parade itself. And that's very interesting because, to be perfectly clear, the protests were huge. Now that we have a few days in the rearview mirror, the protests around the country were significant. There were big turnouts in many, many cities. The protest in Washington, D.C., this is the No King protest that was organized in Washington, D.C., that one didn't actually disrupt the parade, which is interesting because you sort of saw it on split screen, right? And it's not to say there weren't protesters that were, messing with the parade goers, and I'm sure vice versa as well. But you see the split screen of the military parade with the DC No King protest and with the nationwide No King protest. And there was a media narrative that it kind of overshadowed. One overshadowed the other. And at least in DC, that just wasn't the case. The parade sort of went along just fine. There were some indications that might not be the case before the parade actually happened, but it didn't turn out to be the case. It seemed like it was really secure, well secured, which is an enormously difficult thing to do on the National Mall here in Washington, D.C., let alone with a tragedy that occurred in Minnesota earlier that same day. People were on edge throughout the country, particularly in D.C., and so the parade was perfectly secure. From what our team experienced, it took forever. That is a quote. It took forever to get inside. So probably one of the good things that it took forever verbatim to get inside when you're keeping a secure perimeter. But I think also just speaks to what we were talking about a moment ago about the crowd not exactly being tiny. So on that note, a couple of the big narratives that emerge as well is that this is Donald Trump's birthday parade. It just so happens, and I really mean this in a way that it's kind of amusing. My bemusement is real here. It just so happens that Donald Trump's birthday was the exact same day as the birthday of the U.S. Army, and that's what was being celebrated. The Army was already planning to celebrate its 250th birthday. Donald Trump, his birthday is the same day. Now, that Army birthday is a Saturday in June. If you go much later in June, then it gets unbearably hot here in DC. And if you do it on a day that's not a Saturday, I mean, you could do it on a Friday or a Sunday for sure. But you're obviously, not helping your turnout chances. So if you have a Saturday in June that happens to be the actual birthday of the U.S. Army, do you then change the date because it makes it look seriously a little North Korean? If you have a protest on, as Hillary Clinton put it, Dear Leader's birthday, or a military parade on Dear Leader's birthday, do you change the date? I think no, because it's the actual actual birthday of the army. But apparently from what my colleagues report back to me, people were eager to sing happy birthday to Donald Trump. There's a video of everyone singing happy birthday to Donald Trump, presenting him with a flag. But also there's no way around it. It does feel fascist. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it feels like it. When you have a at least $25 million military parade on the president's birthday, the No Kings branding does actually hit a little bit when it happens to be his birthday. Now, it doesn't seem like they really played that angle up, which is wise because you want all of the focus in a constitutional republic like the United States to be on the army, not on the commander-in-chief, not on the president. Of course, that's the case. So either way, it's difficult. It's a true no-win situation. You either have it on the actual birthday of the army and have it be the president's birthday and deal with all those optics, or move it and you're not on the army's birthday, and you're either going to be running into like potential dangerously hot weather, or you are on a worse off day. And again, it's not the Army's actual birthday, so you're missing out on the celebration of the day of the Army's actual founding. So that one is interesting. The other one is, a lot of people were saying this is inspired by to get back into the fascism point, like North Korea or China. Well, reportedly, Trump was inspired by the Bastille Day military parade in France. So a couple of things here that, again, it's very easy. This is one of the interesting things about Donald Trump. It's very easy to, because the broader narrative is so powerful with him, and because he says things like he posts a Napoleon quote that, what is the particular one? Something to the effect of, he who saves his country does no wrong, or violates no law, something to that effect. He posts stuff like that. So it's not just the fault of the left or the, sort of hysterical never Trump Republicans that people easily sort of see Trump through that strongman narrative. It's not only the fault of the left for seeing him that way. He plays into it, he has fun with it, and he seems to take it actually seriously in times like when you're posting that Napoleon quote. Yeah, I get it. At the same time, it's not always, it doesn't mean that every narrative that emerges that fits that bigger picture is true. I'm not even saying that the bigger picture is true. I'm saying that Trump it's true that Trump feeds into the bigger picture. And obviously they're pursuing what's called unitarian executive theory via Russ Vogt, trying to reconsolidate power away from executive agency bureaucrats and into the hands of the president. But when you have that happening alongside the posting about, violating no law, I think it's absolutely reasonable for people to, and myself included, sometimes look at that and feel uncomfortable with the consolidation of power in the hands of an executive who seems to care about things more than the Constitution. Not always, but sometimes. So you have that on the one hand. But on the other hand, in this case, it actually was the Army's birthday, and this really comes from France. So it's very easy to jump to incorrect conclusions when it comes to Trump, as those conclusions support these kind of easy, reflexive, big picture narratives about him. But I think that's where it's especially dangerous. On things like unitary executive theory, by the way, is a good example, because sometimes these are perfectly reasonable policy ideas from Russ Vogt and others, like the fact that a bureaucrat at the EPA, take an example maybe for the left, shouldn't be able to come through the revolving door, leave Chevron, go into the EPA, and start making environmental policy, that would cut against what the president actually wants his EPA to do. The president should have the power to fire that person for cause, and the president should have the power to ensure that his own executive agency, he was elected, the people at the executive agencies were not, he was elected by the American people. He should be able to make sure that the agencies under his purview are doing what he wants. Now, the independent agencies like the National Labor Relations Board and others are a bit of a different story. And that gets into Humphrey's executor, and we've had guests talk about all of that. But that's where, again, I think that sometimes these easy conclusions with Trump, we get in, it's like a reflex, right? Like it's the doctor hitting your knee. It just bounces right back out because sometimes it's easy. And I actually think it's really dangerous with him because it's obviously not always true. And the better that we understand Trump, and I mean that whether you understand him to be good or bad, or sometimes a combination of both, the better we understand Donald Trump as a public, the better we can determine what the right next step is for the country, what the best steps are that are on the table right now. Otherwise, we just don't really understand what's going on, and it's just so easy to muddy the waters. So that's my take. I was super grateful for our team for getting out there. I would have been there myself. I had a conflict, but important event. A lot of media coverage that seemed to miss the mark. But also, I think just important to have a clear picture of what happened on that day. That is the 250th birthday of the Army here in the United States, and was celebrated to the tune of millions of dollars by the President of the United States. Was a big, apparently, public-private partnership. So I was really glad to be able to check in with our team throughout the day and to check in with them over the last couple of days, sort of compare notes, see what it was like on the ground, and how that was reflected or not reflected in some of the media coverage. So thank you to them. Thank you for everyone tuning in here. Make sure to subscribe at undercurrents.tv, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube. And we will be back here soon with more.